The mop bucket wheels squeaked against linoleum. 3 in the morning. St. Catherine's Hospital, 4th floor, medical wing. The fluorescents hummed overhead, constant and tired, the same sound they had made for 30 years. The air smelled like disinfectant and old coffee, the kind that sat too long in the break room pot. Cold, stale, familiar. Elena Kovac pushed water across tile, gray strands loose from her bun, scrubs faded from 1,000 washes. 60 years old. Night shift, environmental services. Invisible to everyone who mattered. Her hands moved in steady rhythm. Dip, ring, push. Dip, ring, push. The motion was meditative, deliberate. She had learned long ago that repetition could silence memory. Most nights, it worked. Most nights. Dr. Brian Keswick passed without looking up from his phone, coffee in one hand, chart tucked under his arm. Second-year resident, confident in the way only the newly credentialed could be. Jesus, Elena, you missed a spot. He pointed at a scuff mark near the nurse's station, still scrolling. His voice carried the casual dismissiveness of someone who had never learned her last name. She nodded once. No words. Pushed the mop back over the mark. Honestly, I don't know why they don't just hire younger staff. A nurse at the station, Rebecca, spoke to another without lowering her voice. She barely speaks English, and she's so slow. Elena's hand tightened on the handle. Just slightly. Just enough to feel the wood grain press into her palm. She spoke 6 languages fluently. English was the easiest. But she had learned, decades ago, that silence was safer than correction. Invisibility was a choice she made every shift, every year, every time someone looked past her like she was part of the furniture. She moved down the hallway, bucket wheels squeaking, and let their words fade behind her. Room 447, post-op recovery. A woman in her 60s lay awake, eyes half open, face pale and drawn. The chart on the wall said gallbladder removal, routine, no complications. But the woman's breathing was shallow, her hand pressed to her stomach, nausea evident in the tightness around her mouth. Elena set the mop aside, stepped to the bedside, adjusted the pillow with exact pressure, tilting the woman's head 15 degrees to the left. Not enough to strain the neck, just enough to relieve pressure on the vagus nerve. The woman exhaled. Her face softened. The nausea faded. Bolje? Elena asked softly. Better? The woman blinked, surprised to hear her own language. Yes, thank you. Elena smoothed the blanket, checked the IV line without touching it, and returned to her mop. She did not wait for further gratitude. She had learned long ago not to linger. Dr. Keswick walked past the room a moment later, glanced inside. Lucky guess with the pillow, he said to no one in particular. Elena kept mopping. At 4:32 a.m., she took her break. The staff locker room was empty, fluorescent light flickering in the corner. She sat on the bench, pulled a thermos of tea from her bag, and let the silence settle around her like a blanket. Her locker was third from the end, plain, unremarkable. Inside, beneath her spare uniform, sat a small wooden box. She did not open it. She never opened. It ended during shifts, but she touched the latch just once with the tip of her finger. Inside that box, a tarnished silver pendant. Medical caduceus crossed with a rifle. Unit insignia beneath, worn smooth by decades of touch. A field journal. 30 years old, bloodstained. A photograph. 32 people in scrubs and fatigues, exhausted, alive. 19 of them were dead now. Elena closed the locker without looking inside. She finished her tea in silence, rinsed the thermos in the sink, and returned to the 4th floor. The night stretched ahead. Hours of squeaking wheels and fluorescent hum. Hours of being looked past, spoken over, dismissed. She had worn this uniform for 30 years. She had chosen it. She had needed it. Because the alternative was remembering what her hands used to do. What they had been trained to do. What they had done in basements and hallways and bombed-out schools when there was no anesthetic, no power. No hope. She pushed the mop down the empty corridor. The hospital slept around her. Machines beeped. Monitors glowed. Life continued, fragile and relentless. And Elena Kovac remained invisible. By choice. By necessity. By survival. At 5:47 a.m., she finished her shift, clocked out, walked 6 blocks to her apartment in the pre-dawn cold. The city was waking. Delivery trucks rumbled past. A jogger nodded at her without seeing her. She climbed 3 flights of stairs, unlocked her door, and stepped into a space almost as anonymous as she was. 1 bedroom, a kitchen table, a single photograph on the wall, a landscape, purchased from a thrift store because the wall had looked too empty without it. She made tea, sat by the window, watched the sun rise over St. Catherine's in the distance. 30 years of mop buckets and night shifts and silence. 30 years of being no one. It had been enough. It had been safe. But somewhere, in a place she did not let herself think about, Elena Kovac knew that safety was not the same as peace. And peace was something she had left behind in 1991, in a city called Vukovar, in a war that had taken everything she had been and left only what she could carry. She finished her tea, slept, and when she woke, she would return to St. Catherine's, put on her scrubs, and become invisible again. It was the only way she knew how to survive. The trauma bay doors slammed open at 4:17 a.m. Gunshot wound. Male, mid-20s, gang violence. Paramedics shouting vitals, blood pooling on the gurney, the metallic smell sharp and immediate. Elena was 2 rooms away, mopping. The sound hit her first. Not the words. The sound beneath the words. The wet gurgle of a sucking test wound. The frantic beeping. The way the paramedic's voice cracked on the word coding. Her hand froze mid-stroke. The mop handle felt wrong suddenly. Too light. Too clean. Her breath came shallow. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered. And for a moment, just a moment, they were not fluorescent at all. Dust in the air. Screaming in Serbian. A schoolhouse in Vukovar, 1991. Walls pocked with shrapnel. Blood on her hands, not hers. A boy, 16, same wet gurgle, same rhythm. She had no chest tube. She used a pen casing and a section of IV tubing. He lived. 19 others that day did not. Elena blinked. She was in St. Catherine's, not Vukovar. The floor was clean. The lights were steady. The screaming was controlled, professional, the kind that happened in hospitals where people still believed in survival. But her feet had already carried her to the trauma bay door. Through the window, she saw Dr. Keswick fumbling with the chest tube kit, hands shaking, another resident trying to intubate, but the airway was full of blood. A nurse called for suction. Someone paged the attending. The monitor alarm screamed. Elena's jaw tightened. She turned away. Not her place. Not anymore. She returned to her mop, dipped it, wrung it, pushed it across tile that did not need cleaning. But then a nurse ran past her, nearly knocking the bucket over. "We're losing him. Someone paged Dr. Ortega. Where the hell is Ortega?" Elena looked back through the window. The monitor flatlined. Dr. Keswick stepped back, pale, defeated. The resident with the intubation kit lowered his hands. Elena's hand was on the door before she thought about it. She moved through the room like water. No hesitation, no announcement. She shoved Keswick aside, not rough, just absolute, and placed 2 fingers on the patient's trachea, feeling for the cricothyroid membrane. "Scalpel," she said, accented, but command clear. A nurse, too shocked to question, handed it over. 15 seconds. Vertical incision, 1 centimeter. Horizontal cut through the membrane. Tube insertion. Bag ventilation. The monitor beeped. Once, twice, steady. Elena set the scalpel down, wiped her hands on her scrubs, and walked out. Behind her, Dr. Keswick stared. "What the hell did you just do?" She did not answer. By the time she reached the hallway, her hands were shaking. She gripped the mop handle to stop them. Muscle memory, old training, the kind that never left, no matter how many years you spent trying to bury it. A nurse appeared beside her, young, wide-eyed. "Who are you?" Elena looked at her, said nothing, returned to mopping. But the nurse did not leave. "That was a crick. You just did a field crick in under 20 seconds. Elena kept her eyes down. "Where did you learn that?" "Long time ago," Elena said quietly. "Where?" Elena paused. The mop stilled. "In a war." The nurse opened her mouth, closed it, walked away. Elena continued down the hallway, bucket wheels squeaking, but the silence felt different now, heavier, like a door she had kept locked for 30 years had just cracked open. At 6:15 a.m., she clocked out, walked home in the cold, climbed the stairs, sat at the kitchen table. The wooden box sat in front of her. She had taken it from her locker. She did not remember deciding to bring it home. She opened it. The pendant gleamed dull in the morning light. The field journal lay beneath, pages brittle. She opened it to a random page. November 14th, 1991. Vukovar, basement of municipal hospital. No power. 6 casualties. 3 survived. Amputation with kitchen knife. No anesthesia. Patient sedated with alcohol and shock. Her handwriting. Neat, clinical. The handwriting of someone who believed documentation mattered, even in hell. She turned the page. November 18th, 1991. School. School building. Sector 4. 12 wounded. 9 critical. Performed 3 surgeries simultaneously. Lost 2. 1 child age 7. Shrapnel to the chest. No blood for transfusion. She closed the journal. Her hands were steady now. They always were when she let herself remember. That was the problem. She had spent 30 years convincing herself she had left that person behind. The surgeon, the officer. A woman who could cut into a human body with a kitchen knife and save a life. But 20 seconds in a trauma bay had proven what she had always known. You could bury a skill. You could bury a name. You could bury a war, but you could not bury your hands. At 7 a.m., her phone rang. Unknown number. She stared at it. Let it ring 3 times. Answered. Miss Kovac? A woman's voice. Formal. Professional. Yes. This is Amanda Reyes, Hospital Administration. We need you to come in for a meeting this afternoon. 2 p.m. It's regarding the incident in the trauma bay. Elena said nothing. Miss Kovac? I'll be there. She hung up, sat in the silence, looked at the journal, at the pendant, at the photograph of 32 people who had believed they were saving a country. 19 of them were dead, 13 were scattered, and 1 was sitting in a small apartment in America, pretending she had never held a scalpel. Elena closed the box. She knew what the meeting would be. Questions, concerns. How did you know how to do that? Where did you train? Why is there no record? She had answers prepared, vague ones, safe ones. But part of her, the part that had just saved a man's life in 15 seconds, wondered if maybe she was tired of safe answers. If maybe 30 years was long enough. She made tea, watched the sun climb higher, and for the first time in decades, Elena Kovac let herself remember what it felt like to be a surgeon. The conference room smelled like stale coffee and anxiety. Elena sat across from Dr. Marcus Ortega, chief of trauma, 2 nurses she recognized from the night shift, Dr. Keswick, and a man in a suit who introduced himself as hospital legal counsel. 2 p.m. exactly. She had arrived 10 minutes early. Old habit. In the army, early was on time was late. Dr. Ortega folded his hands on the table, mid-50s, graying at the temples, the kind of exhaustion that came from years of impossible decisions. Miss Kovac, he began carefully, you performed an emergency cricothyroidotomy without authorization last night. Elena met his eyes, said nothing. Your environmental services staff. You have no medical credentials on file with this hospital. He was dying, she said simply. That's not the point. He is alive. Silence filled the space between them. Dr. Keswick cleared his throat. I've been asking around. Nobody knows where you trained. Your file just says, foreign certifications under review since 1993. 30 years, and nothing. Elena's face did not change. The lawyer leaned forward. Miss Kovac, performing a medical procedure without a license is a serious legal issue. For you and for the hospital. I worked in a war, she said quietly. I learned there. Which war? Ortega asked. She looked at him for a long moment, calculating, deciding how much truth was safe. Yugoslavia, 1991 to 1995. Keswick frowned. You were a combat medic? No. Then what? Elena exhaled slowly. I was a surgeon. The room went still. Ortega leaned back. A surgeon? Yes. Yugoslav army? Yes. And you've been mopping floors here for 30 years? Yes. The lawyer scribbled notes. One of the nurses stared. Keswick looked like someone had just told him the janitor was actually an astronaut. Ortega studied her. Why didn't you recertify? Practice here? Elena's jaw tightened. I had my reasons. That's not an answer. It is. The only one I have. Silence again. Heavier this time. Ortega glanced at the lawyer, then back at Elena. We're placing you on administrative leave. Paid. Pending investigation into your credentials and the incident. Elena nodded once. Am I fired? No, but you can't work until we sort this out. She stood. Then we are finished. Miss Kovac, Ortega said as she reached the door. That man is alive because of you. I want you to know that. She paused, did not turn around, I know, she said quietly, and left. Elena did not go home. She walked. 6 blocks became 12. 12 became 20. The city moved around her, indifferent and loud. She had always liked that about cities. You could disappear into them, become one face among millions. She found herself outside a diner, sat at the counter, ordered coffee she did not drink. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she did not recognize. This is Rebecca from 4th floor. I told my husband what you did. He says thank you. He was the one you saved. Elena stared at the message. She had not known, had not asked. In the chaos, he had been a body, a problem, a set of vitals crashing. Not a husband, not someone's reason to come home. She deleted the message, paid for the coffee, walked home. That night, she did not sleep. She sat at the kitchen table with the wooden box open in front of her. The journal, the pendant, the photographs. Her phone rang at 11:43 p.m. Unknown number. She answered. Elena Kovac? A man's voice. Formal, accented, Dutch maybe. Yes, my name is Peter van der Linde. I'm an investigator with the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. Her blood went cold. We've been looking for you for a very long time. She said nothing. We have testimony from multiple sources that you served as chief trauma surgeon for the Yugoslav People's Army Medical Unit during the siege of Vukovar. Is that correct? Elena's hand tightened on the phone. Miss Kovac? Yes, she said finally. We need you to testify. I was never charged with anything. You're not a defendant. You're a witness. A protected witness. But there are men currently on trial for war crimes committed in Vukovar. Crimes you witnessed. Patients you treated. Executions that happened in your hospital. Her throat tightened. We've subpoenaed your testimony. You'll receive formal documentation within 48 hours. I do not want to go back, she said quietly. I understand. But this isn't optional, Miss Kovac. The tribunal has jurisdiction. You'll be provided full protection, legal support, and transport to The Hague. Silence. I'm sorry, van der Linde said, and he sounded like he meant it. But the dead deserve justice. And you're one of the only witnesses left alive. Elena closed her eyes. When? 2 weeks. We'll be in touch. The line went dead. Elena set the phone down, looked at the photograph, at the faces of people she had loved, people she had failed. For 30 years she had run from this, from them, from the weight of what she had seen. She had believed silence was survival, but maybe silence was just another kind of death. She picked up the journal, opened it to the first page. October 2nd, 1991. Vukovar under siege. I am 28 years old. I am chief trauma surgeon. I believe I can save them all. She read through the night, every page, every name, every death. By dawn, she had made a decision. If they wanted her testimony, they would get it. All of it. Every name, every crime. Every man who had fired into a hospital ward and called it war. She would go back, not because she wanted to, but because the dead had waited long enough. St. Catherine's cafeteria. 2 days after the phone call, Elena sat alone at a corner table, coffee untouched, staring at nothing. She had been placed on administrative leave, but old routines were hard to break. She came at dawn anyway, sat in the same spot, watched the hospital wake up around her. She did not expect company. But then someone sat across from her. A man, late 50s, thin, tired eyes that had seen too much and remembered everything. He looked at her for a long moment, then spoke. Doktorka, doctor. Elena's hand froze on her cup. Her blood turned cold. That word, that title. No one had called her that in 30 years. She looked up slowly. The man's face was older, weathered, but his eyes were the same. She had seen those eyes before, in a basement, in the dark. I knew I recognized you. He continued, his voice low, accented. Even after all these years, even in those scrubs. Elena shook her head. You have the wrong person. Srebrenica, he said quietly. 1995. You treated my son, shrapnel wound to the abdomen. You operated in a basement with a flashlight and kitchen knives. Her throat tightened. He lived because of you. She set the cup down carefully. Her hands wanted to shake. She did not let them. I do not know what you are talking about. Your hands, he said, nodding toward them. You still hold things the same way, precise, controlled. And your eyes, I will never forget them. A nurse walking by slowed, listened. You were part of Doctors Without Borders by then, but before that you served in the Yugoslav People's Army Medical Corps. Unit 73, Chief Trauma Surgeon. Elena stood abruptly. You are mistaken. Dr. Elena Kovac, he said louder now, the angel of Vukovar. The cafeteria went silent, heads turned. Conversations stopped. Elena's voice came out low, controlled, but with an edge that could cut. That woman is dead. No, the man said, tears forming in his eyes now. She is standing right in front of me. He reached into his jacket. Elena tensed, but he pulled out a photograph. Old, faded, creased from years of carrying. He placed it on the table. A field hospital. Mud. Blood. Exhausted faces in scrubs and fatigues, and in the center, younger but unmistakable, Elena Kovac. My son is 43 now, the man said. He has 2 daughters. They exist because you refused to let him die. Elena stared at the photograph, at her own face, at the woman she used to be. I came to this hospital because my wife needed surgery, the man continued. I saw you mopping the floor 2 weeks ago. I thought I was seeing a ghost. But then I heard what you did in the trauma bay, the cricothyroidotomy, and I knew. He stood. I just wanted to say thank you, for my son, for my granddaughters, for the life you gave us. He left the photograph on the table and walked away. Elena stood frozen. Around her the cafeteria remained silent. Then the whisper started. Did he just say Angel of Vukovar? She was a war surgeon? She's been mopping floors? Elena grabbed the photograph, shoved it in her pocket, and walked out. But the damage was done. By noon, someone had Googled the name, found a scanned document from a 1992 Red Cross report. A list of medical personnel who had served in Vukovar. Her name, her photograph, her rank. By evening, a journalist was in the hospital lobby, asking questions. By the next morning, her face was on the internet. War hero hiding as hospital janitor for 30 years. Elena did not leave her apartment for 3 days. She sat at the kitchen table, curtains drawn, phone buzzing with unknown numbers, emails from news outlets, requests for interviews, messages from people claiming to remember her. On the 3rd day, someone knocked on her door. She did not answer. They knocked again. Miss Kovac, my name is David Chen. I'm a reporter with the Boston Globe. I just want to ask you a few questions. Elena stayed silent. People are calling you a hero. They want to know your story. She closed her eyes. Why did you hide for so long? Because heroes do not have nightmares, she thought. Because heroes do not remember the ones they could not save. Because the dead do not care about medals. The knocking stopped. She heard footsteps retreating down the hallway. That night, she opened the wooden box again, took out the journal, flipped to a page near the end. November 19, 1991. Last day in Vukovar. Hospital evacuated. 62 patients. 34 survived transport. 28 executed by Serbian forces after we left. I was not there. I could not stop it. I will never forgive myself. She closed the journal. The subpoena arrived the next morning. Official, stamped, unavoidable. The International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia requests your testimony in case IT 9514. You are required to appear at The Hague on March 18th. Failure to comply will result in international warrant. Elena read it twice, set it on the table, next to the photograph the man had left. Staring at her younger self, at the woman who had believed she could save everyone. She picked up her phone, dialed the number Vanderlind had left. He answered on the second ring. Ms. Kovac, I will testify, she said, but I have one condition. What is it? I want the full list. Every man on trial, every crime, every name, you'll have it. And I want protection, not for me, for the people. People I name, witnesses, survivors. You'll have that too. She exhaled slowly. Then I will be there. Thank you, Ms. Kovac. She hung up, sat in the silence of her apartment. Outside, the world had discovered who she was. But inside, Elena Kovac was remembering who she had been, and deciding, for the first time in 30 years, that maybe those 2 people did not have to be so different. Maybe the woman who had saved lives in a war could still save them now, just in a different way. She looked at the photograph one more time, then placed it back in the box. 3 days since the cafeteria. 3 days since her past had walked up and called her by name. And now, there was no going back. Day 4 since the cafeteria. 3 days since her face had been on the news. The hospital had called twice. She had not answered. St. Catherine's Emergency Department. 11:47 p.m. Elena heard the sirens from her apartment 6 blocks away. Multiple units. The rhythm was wrong. Too many. Too fast. She stood at her window, watching the lights converge on the hospital. Mass casualty incident. She knew that sound, that urgency. Her hands tightened on the windowsill. Not her war, not her place. But her coat was already in her hands, her shoes already on. She was out the door before she let herself think about why. The emergency department was chaos. Building collapse. 12 victims incoming. Ambulances unloading in waves. Blood, screaming, the smell of concrete dust and copper. Elena arrived just as the first gurneys crashed through the doors. Security had been notified about her. Administration was drafting a statement. But the ambulances had arrived first, and in trauma, hesitation kills. No one stopped her. Dr. Keskik saw her first, eyes wide. "Elena, you're not supposed to be here." She walked past him, stopped in the center of the trauma bay, looked at the incoming wounded, assessed, prioritized, decided. Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. "You," she said, pointing at a nurse. "Chest compressions, Bay 3. You, intubate Bay 7. Flail chest, he has maybe 2 minutes. You, type and cross, 6 units O negative, now." The staff froze. Dr. Ortega pushed through the crowd. "Elena, you cannot do this." She turned to him. Her eyes were different now, harder, clearer. "Then stop me." He opened his mouth, closed it, did not stop her. Elena moved. Bay 1, femoral artery bleed. She clamped it with her bare hands, called for sutures, talked a shaking resident through the repair. Bay 2, tension pneumothorax. She grabbed a needle decompression kit, placed it between the second and third rib, mid-clavicular line, released the pressure. The patient gasped. Monitor stabilized. Bay 4, crush injury, compartment syndrome. She called for a fasciotomy kit, made the incision herself when no one moved fast enough. Bay 5, pediatric, 8 years old, head trauma, unresponsive. Elena's hands hesitated for just a fraction of a second, then moved. She intubated, stabilized the spine, called for a CT, monitored vitals with the focus of someone who had done this 1,000 times in worse conditions. Around her, the chaos bent to her will. Residents followed her orders without question. Nurses moved like they were part of a choreographed machine. Dr. Keswick stopped trying to intervene and started taking notes. For 2 hours, Elena Kovac ran that trauma bay like a battlefield. No wasted movement, no hesitation. Every decision precise and absolute. When it was over, 11 of 12 victims were stable. 1 had been dead on arrival. Nothing could have changed that. Elena stood in the center of the bay, scrubs soaked in blood, breathing steady, face calm. Dr. Ortega approached slowly. "Where the hell did you learn to do that?" She looked at him. "I told you, in a war." "That was not combat medicine, that was command." She said nothing. "You ran this room better than anyone I have seen in 30 years. Elena peeled off her gloves, dropped them in the bin. "I need to wash my hands." She walked toward the scrub sink. And that was when the doors opened again. 3 black SUVs outside, men in dark suits, military police. A woman in a blue blazer with a UN badge clipped to her belt. They walked straight into the emergency department. Past security, past administration, straight to Elena. The woman in the blazer spoke first. "Dr. Elena Kovac?" Elena turned, still in bloody scrubs, hands dripping water from the sink. "Yes. I and Special Agent Laura Friedman, United Nations War Crimes Tribunal. You have been formally subpoenaed to testify at The Hague. We have a flight leaving in 6 hours." The emergency department went silent. Dr. Ortega stepped forward. "She is hospital staff. You cannot just take her." Agent Friedman handed him a document. Thick, official, sealed. "This is a binding international tribunal order. Dr. Kovac is a material witness in case IT 9514. war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide in the former Yugoslavia. She looked at Elena. You have full witness protection. You will not be charged. But your testimony is not optional. Elena stared at the woman, at the document, at the emergency department behind her, still stained with the blood of people she had just saved. I need to pack, she said quietly. You have 2 hours. Elena nodded, turned to Dr. Ortega. The child in Bay 5, monitor for intracranial pressure. If it spikes, call neurosurgery immediately. He blinked. You are giving me medical advice? Yes. You are environmental services. Elena met his eyes. No, I am not. She walked past the federal agents, past the stunned residents, past the nurses who had worked beside her for 30 years without knowing who she was. At the door, she stopped, turned back. Dr. Keswick. He looked up, pale. The cricothyroidotomy you tried to perform the other night. Your hand position was wrong. You would have severed the thyroid cartilage. Next time, palpate first. Feel the landmarks, then cut. She paused. You will get better. But only if you stop assuming you already know everything. Keswick said nothing. Elena left. 2 hours later, she was in a black SUV heading toward the airport. Her apartment had taken 10 minutes to pack. She owned almost nothing. The wooden box sat on her lap. Agent Friedman sat across from her. You have been difficult to find, Dr. Kovac. I did not want to be found. We have been in searching since 2001. But you changed your name slightly when you emigrated. Dropped the accent mark. Never recertified. You disappeared into the civilian workforce. Elena said nothing. We only found you because of the cafeteria incident. Someone posted about it online. A journalist connected the dots. Elena looked out the window. The city passed in blurred lights. The men you will testify against are responsible for over 800 deaths. Many of them in your hospital. You are the last surviving witness who can place them at the scene. Elena closed her eyes. I know. Are you ready? She opened the wooden box, looked at the journal, at the photograph. No, she said quietly. But I will do it anyway. The SUV pulled onto the highway. Behind her, St. Catherine's faded into the distance. Ahead, The Hague waited, and Elena Kovac, for the first time in 30 years, stopped running. The Hague, International Criminal Court. Elena sat in a witness preparation room, alone except for a tribunal lawyer named Catherine Marsh. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, the kind of person who missed nothing. The room was sterile. White walls, a table, 2 chairs. A pitcher of water no one had touched. Outside, the machinery of international justice moved in silence. Translators, prosecutors, defendants in holding cells who would soon sit across from her in a courtroom. You do not have to be afraid, Catherine said. Elena looked at her. I am not afraid. Then why did you hide for 30 years? The question sat between them. Elena was silent for a long time. Then she spoke. I was 28 years old, she said. Chief trauma surgeon, youngest in the Yugoslav army. I believed I was saving lives. I believed that was enough. She looked at her hands. 60 years old now, still steady. Then the siege began. Vukovar. 3 months. No power, no water, no supplies. We operated in basements, in hallways, in bombed-out schools. We ran out of anesthetic in the first 2 weeks. I held people down while we cut into them. Her voice did not waver. It never did when she spoke about the war. Emotion was a luxury she had learned to bury. I saved 247 people. She paused. I watched 392 die. Catherine said nothing, just listened. After the city fell, the Red Cross evacuated us. They took me to Zagreb, then Split, then Italy. I had nothing left. No family, no home. Half my unit was dead. The other half was scattered. Elena poured herself water, drank slowly. I came to America in 1993. I could have recertified, practiced again, but every time I walked into a hospital, I saw them. The ones I could not save. The boy with shrapnel in his chest. The woman who bled out because we had no blood. The child who died because I chose someone else first. Her jaw tightened. So I took the only job where I could still be near medicine, but not responsible, not in command, not deciding who lives and who dies. Catherine leaned forward. You were never charged with anything. You are a witness, not a defendant. I know. Then why testify now? Elena looked up. Her eyes were clear, hard. Because the men who shelled that hospital, who shot patients in their beds, DS, who executed doctors in the street, they need to answer for it. She stood. And I am the only one left who can make them. The testimony took 4 days. Elena spoke in 3 languages, corrected tribunal translators twice, identified 7 defendants by name. She described operations in detail so precise, so unflinching, that hardened prosecutors had to take breaks. She testified about the November 18th massacre, how Serbian forces had entered the hospital after the evacuation, how they had lined up patients too injured to move, how they had executed 28 people in the basement. I was not there, she said, voice steady. I had been evacuated 6 hours earlier, but I knew those patients. I had operated on 14 of them. I knew their names. She listed them, all 28, from memory. The courtroom was silent. Defense attorneys tried to discredit her, asked why she had waited so long, why she had hidden, why her testimony should be trusted after 30 years. Elena reached into her bag, pulled out the field journal. I kept records, she said. She opened it, showed pages, dates, names, procedures, all documented in real time. You kept a journal during a siege? One attorney asked, incredulous. Yes. Why? Elena looked at him. Because I knew one day someone would try to say it did not happen. She turned to the tribunal judges. Every page is dated. Every name is real. Every death is documented. She set the journal on the witness stand. I kept everything, because I knew one day someone you'd ask. On the 4th day, the prosecution rested. Elena was escorted back to her hotel under armed protection. She sat by the window, looked out at The Hague, at a city built on the idea that justice was possible, even decades later. Her phone buzzed, a message from Dr. Ortega. We reviewed your credentials. Everything checks. You are board certified in 3 countries. Your Yugoslav credentials were validated by the U.S. in 1994 under refugee physician provisions. You passed all equivalency exams. You just never activated the license. Elena stared at the message. Another followed. We would like to offer you a position, trauma attending, full faculty, if you want it. She set the phone down, looked at the journal on the table beside her. At the photograph of 32 people, 19 of them were dead, but she had just spoken their names in a courtroom, had made sure the world knew they existed, that their deaths mattered. For 30 years, she had believed silence was survival. But maybe silence was just another kind of forgetting. She picked up the phone, typed a response. I will think about it. Sent it. Sat in the quiet. Outside, the sun set over The Hague. Inside, Elena Kovac felt something she had not felt in 3 decades. Not peace, not yet, but the possibility of it. The courtroom had not brought her closure. Testimonies did not erase nightmares. But she had stood in front of the men who had destroyed her city, had looked them in the eye, had spoken the names of the dead, and they had been forced to listen. That was not justice, but it was a beginning. She opened the journal one more time, turned to the last page, November 20th, 1991. 991. I am leaving Vukovar. I do not know if I will ever practice medicine again. I do not know if I deserve to. Below it, in fresh ink, she wrote, March 22nd, 2023. I testified. I remembered them. I will return to work. She closed the journal, put it back in the wooden box, and for the first time in 30 years, Elena Kovac allowed herself to believe that maybe the woman who had saved lives in a war and the woman who mopped floors in a hospital could be the same person. Maybe she did not have to choose between them. Maybe she could be both. She looked out the window one more time, then began to pack. She had a flight back to Boston in the morning, and a hospital waiting for her answer. St. Catherine's Hospital, 2 weeks later. Elena walked through the main entrance at 6 a.m., the same time she had arrived for 30 years. But this time, she was not wearing scrubs stained from 1,000 washes. She wore dark slacks, a white coat, and her hospital badge clipped to her chest. It read, Dr. Elena Kovac, M.D., Trauma Surgery. The lobby was quiet. Early shift nurses moving between stations, a janitor mopping near the elevators, the same rhythmic squeak she had made for 3 decades. She nodded at him as she passed. He nodded back. The 4th floor was different. A banner hung in the hallway. Simple, understated. Welcome home, Dr. Kovac. Elena stopped, stared at it. Dr. Ortega appeared from the nurse's station, coffee in hand, the same exhaustion in his eyes, but something else now too. Respect. We were not sure you would come back, he said. I was not sure either. He gestured toward the trauma bay. We have a staff meeting at 7. I would like you to say a few words, Elena hesitated. I am not good at speeches. You do not have to be. Just tell them what you told the tribunal. She looked at him. That I failed more than I succeeded? That you never stopped trying. They walked together toward the conference room. Residents gathered, nurses, attending physicians, even environmental services staff, people she had worked beside in silence for years. Dr. Keswick stood near the back. When Elena entered, he straightened. She met his eyes. He looked away first. Ortega stood at the front. Most of you know by now who Dr. Kovac is, what she did during the war, what she has been doing here for 30 years. He turned to her. But I want her to tell you herself why she stayed hidden and why she is here now. Elena stepped forward. The room went silent. She looked at the faces in front of her, young residents who had dismissed her, nurses who had spoken over her, colleagues who had never learned her name. I was chief trauma surgeon during the siege of Vukovar, she said quietly. I was 28. I believed I could save everyone. She paused. I was wrong. I lost more people than I saved, and when the war ended, I could not forgive myself for that. Her voice was steady, but the room felt the weight of every word. So I came here. I took a job where I did not have to make those decisions anymore, where I could be invisible, where I could be near medicine but not responsible for life and death. She looked at Keswick. Some of you treated me like I was nothing, like I did not matter. And I let you, because I believed you were right. Keswick's face went red. But I was wrong about that too. Every person in this hospital matters, every job, every role. The person who mops the floor sees things you do not. The person who delivers meals knows which patients are not eating. The person you ignore might be the one who saves a life when you freeze. She turned to Ortega. I am here now because I am tired of hiding. I am 60 years old. I do not have time left to waste pretending I am less than I am. She looked back at the room. I will work here. I will teach. I will do everything I can to make sure you do not make the mistakes I made. But I will not apologize for surviving. Not anymore. The room was silent. Then someone started clapping. One of the environmental services staff. An older woman Elena had worked beside for 15 years. Then another joined. A nurse. Then a resident. Then the entire room. Elena stood still, unsure what to do with the sound. Ortega stepped forward. I want to announce a new initiative, he said. The Kovac Protocol, a training program for recognizing and utilizing hidden expertise in our staff. We will never again overlook someone because of their job title. He looked at Elena. We failed you. This hospital failed you. But we will not fail the next person. More applause. Elena nodded once. Turned to leave. But Keswick stepped forward. Dr. Kovac. She stopped. He approached slowly, face pale, hands clenched. I need to say something. Elena waited. We treated you like you were nobody, he said. I was arrogant. I was cruel. And I was wrong. His voice cracked. You saved a man's life in 15 seconds. You ran a mass casualty event better than anyone I have ever seen. And I mocked you for mopping floors. He met her eyes. I am sorry, truly. Elena studied him, saw the shame, the regret, the desperate need for forgiveness. You will make mistakes, she said quietly. You will lose patience. You will doubt yourself. That is part of this work. She stepped closer. But if you let arrogance blind you, if you stop listening, if you believe your title makes you better than the person beside you, then you will fail. Not just as a doctor, as a human being. Keswick nodded, throat tight. You have talent, Elena continued. But talent without humility is dangerous. Learn that now, or this job will destroy you. She turned to go, then stopped. And Dr. Keswick, yes? Thank you for apologizing. That took courage. She left him standing there. The days that followed were a blur of orientations, meetings, credentialing reviews. Elena had not practiced surgery in 30 years, but her hands remembered. Muscle memory did not fade. She observed in the trauma bay, assisted on surgeries, corrected residents with the same precision she had used in Vukovar. Within a week, She was leading her first operation, a ruptured spleen, textbook case. Her hands moved without hesitation. The residents watched in silence as she worked. Every motion economical, precise, perfect. When it was over, the patient was stable. The room exhaled. One of the residents approached after. "Dr. Kovac, how do you stay so calm?" Elena peeled off her gloves. "Because panic kills. Hesitation kills. If you do not trust your hands, your patient will die." She looked at him. "You train until the motion is automatic, until you do not have to think, until your hands know what to do, even when your mind is screaming." "How long does that take?" Elena thought of basements and bombings and bodies she could not save. Longer than you want, but less than you fear. 3 weeks after her return, the hospital held a formal ceremony. A plaque was unveiled outside the new trauma wing, the Dr. Elena Kovac Center for Emergency Medicine. Elena stood beside it, surrounded by staff, administration, even a few journalists who had covered her story. Ortega gave a speech about resilience, hidden heroes, second chances. Elena barely heard it. She was looking at the environmental services staff standing in the back, the people she had worked beside for 30 years. After the ceremony, she walked over to them. "You knew," she said to the older woman who had clapped first. "Didn't you?" The woman smiled. "I knew you were not just a cleaner. I did not know you were a war hero, but I knew you were something." Elena shook her head. "I am not a hero. You stayed. That is enough." Elena looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. That night, she sat in her apartment, the wooden box open on the table, the journal, the photograph, the pendant. She had testified, she had returned, she had stopped hiding, but the dead were still dead, and no amount of justice or recognition would bring them back. She traced the faces in the photograph. 19 of them gone, but 13 still alive, scattered across the world, living lives she had helped save. That had to mean something. It had to be enough. She closed the box, put it on the shelf, and tomorrow she would return to St. Catherine's. She would teach, she would operate, she would save who she could. Not because it erased the past, but because it honored it. 10 years later, St. Catherine's Hospital, the Dr. Elena Kovac Center for Emergency Medicine. The lecture hall was full. 30 residents sat in tiered rows, notebooks open, eyes attentive. Morning light filtered through tall windows. The air smelled like coffee and anticipation. Elena stood at the front, 70 years old now. Gray hair pulled back, white coat pressed. Her hands, still steady, rested on the podium. She looked at the faces in front of her. Young, eager, unbroken. They had no idea what was coming. "Trauma does not care about your protocol," she began. Her voice carried the same command it had in Vukovar, in The Hague, in every operating room she had entered for 50 years. It does not wait for your preparation. It does not give you time to think. She stepped away from the podium, walked between the rows. You will face impossible situations. You will have no tools, no time, no backup. She stopped, looked at a young resident in the third row. "And you will save them anyway." The resident swallowed, nodded. Elena continued. "I have operated in basements with flashlights. I have performed amputations with kitchen knives. I have held dying patients and told them lies about survival, because hope was the only medicine I had left." She returned to the front. "You will never face what I faced. I hope you never do. But you will face your own impossible moments. And when you do, you will have a choice." She looked at each of them. "You can freeze. You can panic. You can give up. Pause. Or you can act." Silence filled the room. The difference between a good surgeon and a great one is not skill. It is will. It is the refusal to accept that someone is beyond saving. It is the stubborn, irrational belief that your hands can do what statistics say is impossible. She picked up a surgical kit from the table, opened it. "This is a cricothyroidotomy kit. How many of you have performed one?" 3 hands went up. "How many of you froze the first time you had to?" All 3 hands stayed up. Elena nodded. "Good. Fear means you understand the stakes. But fear cannot stop your hands. You train until the motion is automatic, until you do not have to think, until muscle memory takes over when your brain shuts down." She demonstrated the procedure on a mannequin. Slowly, precisely. Palpate the landmarks. Identify the cricothyroid membrane. Stabilize the trachea. Vertical incision. Horizontal cut. Insert tube. Ventilate. She set down the scalpel. 15 seconds. That is all you have. And if you hesitate, your patient dies. A resident raised her hand. Dr. Kovac, how do you handle the pressure? How do you stay calm? Elena was quiet for a moment, then spoke. I do not stay calm. I learn to function through panic. There is a difference. She looked at the young woman. You will lose patience. You will make mistakes. You will replay surgeries in your mind for years, wondering what you could have done differently. Her voice softened. That weight never goes away. But you carry it, because the alternative is walking away, and the people who need you cannot afford for you to walk away. After the lecture, a young resident approached, nervous, holding a folder. Dr. Kovac, I wanted to show you something. Elena waited. The resident opened the folder. Inside, a photograph. A woman in her 80s, smiling, surrounded by family. This is my grandmother, the resident said. She was in Srebrenica in 1995. She had a shrapnel wound. A doctor operated on her in a basement. She said the doctor had gray eyes and hands that did not shake. Elena stared at the photograph. She is alive because of you, and I am here because of her. The resident's voice cracked. I became a doctor because she told me about the woman who refused to let her die. I did not know it was you until I saw your picture in the hospital. Elena looked at the young woman, at the grandmother's face in the photograph. She did not remember her. There had been so many, but she had been there. Her hands had saved this life, and that life had created this one. What is your name? Elena asked quietly. Dr. Amina Hasek. Elena nodded. Your grandmother was brave, and so are you. Amina wiped her eyes. Thank you for everything. She left. Elena stood alone in the empty lecture hall, looked at the podium, at the chairs where future surgeons sat and learned, and prepared for their own impossible moments. 30 years of hiding, 10 years of teaching, 400 physicians trained, 11 war crimes convictions, 1 testimony that had helped close a chapter of history, and a grandmother in a photograph, alive, surrounded by family. That evening, Elena returned to her apartment, larger now, not empty, photographs on the walls, books on shelves, a life lived, not hidden. She opened the wooden box one last time. The journal, the pendant, the photograph. She looked at the faces, 19 dead, 13 scattered, and her, the last one, still fighting. She took the photograph out, placed it in a frame, hung it on the wall beside her diplomas and commendations. They deserved to be seen, to be remembered, not hidden in a box, not buried in shame. She made tea, sat by the window, watched the lights of St. Catherine's glow in the distance. An ambulance wailed past, sirens cutting through the night. Elena stood, grabbed her coat. Even at 70, even after decades, the sound still pulled her. She arrived at the hospital 20 minutes later. The trauma bay was controlled chaos, a car accident, multiple victims. Dr. Kezek was leading the response. Older now, confident but not arrogant, he saw her enter. Dr. Kovac, we have it under control. She nodded. I know, I'm just observing. She stood in the corner, watched him work, watched the residents move with precision, watched the system she had helped build function exactly as it should. Kezek stabilized the critical patient, called for imaging, delegated tasks. When it was over, he stepped back, exhaled, and looked at Elena. How did I do? She smiled, just slightly. You did not freeze. You trusted your hands. You saved a life. He smiled back. I had a good teacher. Elena stayed until the patients were stable, then walked out into the cold night air. The city hummed around her, alive, moving, indifferent to the miracles happening in hospitals and operating rooms and trauma bays. But Elena knew. She had always known. Every life saved was a defiance. Every surgery was a battle. Every patient who walked out alive was a victory against entropy and chaos and death. She had fought that battle for 50 years. In war, in peace, in hiding, in plain sight. And she would fight it until her hands no longer remembered how. She looked back at St. Catherine's one more time. The building glowed against the night sky, a beacon, a promise. Inside, residents were learning. Patients were healing. Lives were being saved. And somewhere, in a lecture hall, on a plaque, in the memory of 400 physicians, Elena Kovac's legacy lived on. Not as a war hero, not as a janitor, not as someone defined by her past, but as a surgeon, a teacher, a woman who had refused to let the dead silence her, who had testified when it mattered, who had returned when it hurt, who had taught the next generation to be better than she had been. Elena turned, walked home through the quiet streets. Her hands, still steady, rested in her pockets, ready, always ready, for the next impossible moment. Dr. Elena Kovac testified in 14 war crimes trials between 2013 and 2023. Her testimony contributed to 11 convictions. She trained over 400 physicians before her retirement in 2028. She never stopped working nights.